And welcome to Nats Chat for Tuesday, March 19th, 2024, along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman, who is in West Palm Beach, Florida, the site of National Spring Training. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. Nationals opening day is less than a week and a half away. Feels good to say that. Thursday afternoon, March 28th at the Cincinnati Reds at 4:10. And we now know the Nats starting pitcher for that game. More on that momentarily. A lot to get to on the show. We do want to remind you to check out our website, natschatpodcast.com. You can click on merch to see the great Nats Chat podcast t-shirts that you can buy. We appreciate the support very much. Also, in case you don't know, come to Nats regular season, we do an episode of this show for the morning after every Nats game, Monday through Sunday. Yes, weekends too. Those weekend shows are Tim Schober's most favorite shows. I know that for a fact. But if you are a Nats fan, and you feel underserved by coverage of the team by the DC area sports media, know that we are here doing what we do. And we love having you on board. So I mentioned Nats opening day, Mark, is on March 28th. The 2024 MLB regular season actually starts this Wednesday. The Los Angeles Dodgers versus the San Diego Padres in Seoul, South Korea. First pitch, 6:05 a.m. Eastern in game one of a two-game series. Will you be up early having breakfast in West Palm watching Dodgers-Padres on Wednesday at 6:05 a.m. Eastern?
Well, not at 6:05, but honestly, I get up at 6:30 every morning down here because that's how early we got to get up and get ready to go to the ballpark. They do open clubhouse at 8 a.m. When there's a day game down here. So there's a decent chance I will be up, not necessarily for the purpose of watching that game, but I'll probably, put it on the TV while I'm trying to wake myself up and get ready to go to work. 6 a.m. on the East Coast, that's fine. But if you're a fan of the Dodgers or Padres living in California, that's 3 a.m. I mean, I get it. It's a great thing they're doing this. It's great for the growth of the sport and all that. But my God, if I was a Dodgers or Padres fan living out west, I wouldn't be real thrilled with this, to be honest.
Well, we know in the city of Los Angeles, there are all kinds of people who are up at 3:05 a.m. Maybe not for reasons for watching baseball, but we get the idea. So Nationals opening day coming up, and we on Sunday morning had some news regarding Nationals opening day. Nats manager David Martinez in a session with reporters like Mark on Sunday morning, naming Josiah Gray the Nats 2024 opening day starter. I got to tell you, I was a little nervous because you on Saturday posted on X this idea that, hey, there are rumblings that Davey on Sunday could name the opening day starter. Sunday was St. Patrick's Day. And so I said to myself, oh boy, St. Patrick's Day, Patrick Corbin, third consecutive opening day start. But no, Davey did the right thing. Josiah Gray deservingly gets that opening day nod. And as you wrote about on MASNsports.com, and it's so true, this isn't just like a merit-based thing. There is a symbolism to this. This really does represent a moving forward into a new era, we hope, of national starting pitching.
A long-awaited move. As frustrating as the last couple of years have been, I know, for fans to watch Patrick Corbin take them out on opening day, I think given what the options were at the time, you understood why that was the case. He was always going to be the bridge from the old generation to the new generation. Well, now, finally, I think Josiah Gray has earned the right to have this start. It doesn't mean he's going to be their best starter this year. If you ask me, my hunch is that Mackenzie Gore will be their best starter this season, and maybe he gets the nod a year from now, maybe even Cade Cavalli once he comes back from the injury. We'll see. But where they are right now, I think Josiah Gray makes sense. The All-Star last year, he was their best pitcher last year. The first half was fantastic for him. Labored in the second half, but finished strong after that. So I think he's the right choice. But I mean, get this. He's going to be the first opening day starter for the Nats, not named Scherzer, Strasburg, or Corbin since 2011, when it was Livan Hernandez in his final opening day start for the team. That's a long time of only having three guys start an opening day for you. Scherzer and Strasburg, obviously true aces, Corbin not so much, but I mean, that's the nucleus of the World Championship team. Those three guys who have started opening day for them every year for more than a decade now, and they're finally moving on from that. I think it is a good sign of where they're going and a sign that they are, finally ready to kind of put the past behind them and move on.
So last season, obviously a step forward season for Josiah Gray, as we talked about. with this upcoming season, I think being such a big season in the rebuild, such a telling season in the rebuild, you can hone in on each key player, each potential building block, and kind of see like, where are we with the guy? I think with Josiah Gray, the question would be, is there another level that he gets to, or is this what he is? Now, if this is what he is, you can work with that. Josiah Gray, last regular season, 30 starts, 159 innings, ERA plus a 110. If he's a 110 ERA plus guy moving forward, that's fine. You can work with that. But the question would be, is there another level that he's capable of getting to? Can he be a true ace, or can he be like a really good number two? I know that the idea has been, well, Mackenzie Gore is more upside, and that would still seem to be the case. But, we've seen many times, just because they have more upside doesn't mean that you deliver on the upside. I think it's tricky with Gray because, as we talked about last year, the peripherals suggested that the baseline numbers should not have been as good as they were. I mean, he had a whip last season of 1.459. That's hard to do, have that whip and then have an ERA plus a 110 above league average like that. So you do worry a little bit about, did he overachieve last season? But at the same time, off struggling last season, finished strong, which was great to see. He has avoided injury, knock on wood. He's demonstrating a durability that I think is so encouraging. And if you take a step back, his 2023 season was so much better than his 2021 and 2022 seasons. Like, he really did step forward. He was not a very good pitcher in 21 and 22. He was a good pitcher in 23. So that, to me, is the question. Is this what he is? Because if it is, that's fine. But is there another level that Josiah Gray gets to?
I think he believes there is another level to get to. And I think that's important, that he strives to be better. That is in his DNA. He is, as he has said many times, a noted tinkerer. He's always trying to find some way to get better, whether it's adding a new pitch, perfecting this pitch, changing his mechanics, whatever it might be. Sometimes I think that can be to his detriment. Sometimes I think the Nationals will say to him, hey, focus on what you are good at. You don't have to keep trying to add more. You don't need 7 different pitches in your arsenal. Focus on, throwing fastballs in good locations, and then have your breaking stuff that you can also throw when you need to. But I think it is significant that he has improved each year, like you just said. And think about the narrative coming into last year. What was it with Josiah Gray? Got to eliminate the home runs. And he did that. He was worst in the league the year before, much better this year. Now, what's the next step for him? I think it's reducing the walks. He did actually still walk a bunch of batters last year, which was the other problem he had the previous year. And it kind of got overshadowed a little bit because he would get into these jams and he'd get out of them, and he wouldn't have the big blow-up innings, in part because he didn't give up as many home runs. So if you can keep the home run rate down, if you've sort of figured that part of it out, and you can be a little better with the walks, I think that's where the improvement comes. Does that make him an ace, number one? I personally don't think that's where he's going to get to. I know he wants to believe he can get there. In a perfect world, they don't need him to be that guy. If Gore and Cavalli do prove to be who they're supposed to be, then he's a very solid number 3, I think. But I think there is potential for some improvement there. He certainly wants to improve. And at the very minimum, you just hope there's no more regression, and that those peripherals, like you described last year, weren't actually a sign of him being lucky as opposed to being good.
He was the Nats' lone all-star last season. David Martinez on Sunday did also say that Patrick Corbin will start the second game of the Nats regular season. So in theory, Corbin is not the number 1, but he is the number 2. So is that more about Mackenzie Gore, Jake Irvin workload concerns? Is that more about showing respect to Corbin in the final year of the contract, or what he did in 2019? Why do you think Corbin was given that number 2 start?
I think it's both of those factors. I also think just the way they've been lined up this spring, you don't want to finagle too much the order of guys as you head into the season. And I think, and we don't know this yet, we should find out in a few days. Davey kind of hinted that he'll let us know what the rest of the order is going to be. If it stays the way it's kind of lined up at the moment, it would set up for Jake Irvin to start game 3 in Cincinnati, and then Mackenzie Gore to start game 4, which is the home opener. Now, I'm not saying that was calculated that way to try to give him the home opener, but I think it is a little convenient if that is true. Again, I don't think they look at Jake Irvin as a better starter than Mackenzie Gore, not at this stage, but a little bit of a, hey, let's also show off our other young potential future ace and let him have the honor of the home opener. And so Corbin getting the second start is a little bit of a show respect for the veteran. But I think also there's a way to frame this where they're setting this up so that Mackenzie Gore can actually be the one to start the home opener, as opposed to Corbin or Irvin or Trevor Williams.
And not among those who you just talked about is Jackson Rutledge. It's interesting how this stuff comes out. Sunday morning, we got the news Josiah Gray, 2024 opening day starter. Sunday afternoon, the Nats optioned Jackson Rutledge to AAA Rochester. So any notion of Rutledge being a part of the Nats regular season opening rotation now is out the window. Doesn't mean that he won't be part of the rotation at some point this season, maybe even sooner rather than later, but he's not beginning the regular season at the major league level as a part of that rotation. Now, we talked about this some on the last installment of the podcast. You brought up a guy like Zach Davies, and maybe because Rutledge has options, there is a thinking of let's start Rutledge's season in the minors so we can keep Davies with us at the major league level. But why ultimately was Rutledge sent down? And sent down, before he had to be sent down? Was this about his performance? Was this about that Zach Davies thing? What do you think was the real reasoning behind this?
I don't think it was about performance, because I think he's been fine. I think it is about you've gotten to that point in camp where everybody who's a starting pitcher needs to start throwing 5 innings at a time, and you weren't going to be able to get that for Rutledge here. You send him down, now he can get on his regular 5-day routine at AAA and start the year. Now, Davey made it pretty clear that, like, without firmly saying it, but pretty much said Rutledge is going to be the first guy called up when they need someone. So yes, he has options. He only, spent part of the year at AAA last year, the 4 big league starts, and up and down with those. But I think you saw a glimpse there of what he can be. So I think they do like him. I don't think their opinion of him has changed. They know he's going to be a part of this over the course of the season. And then I think really what this boils down to is there's one spot now for Trevor Williams or Zach Davies. And I do think it's open competition between them. And I think they are internally trying to figure out what makes the most sense. And neither one has looked that great this spring. I don't know that we expected either one to look that great. You're kind of just going off of what their track records are, I think, at this point. Both of them are guys who've had success in the past, but certainly last year did not have any success. Williams with the Nats and Davies with the Diamondbacks. Trevor Williams is going to be on the team because of the contract. He's making $7 million this year. There is still this thought that if they have a better 5th starter, that they think he could be valuable to them as a long man in the bullpen, a role he's held in the past and been successful with. I think it's just a matter of, do they think Davies is better enough or better at all to go ahead and put him in the opening day rotation? That's yet to be determined. He'll have another start here coming up. I think that's a decision that is coming up here probably at the end of the week, and it's one that could go either way right now.
In terms of how the starters have looked in these exhibition games, the numbers aren't pretty, but we know that spring training stats for starting pitchers, especially, like you really can't get too sucked into them. Small sample sizes, guys are working on things. So when it comes to Gray and Gore and Irvin in particular, how have they looked so far in Grapefruit League play?
It's really varied start to start. And what I would say is look at the game logs for them and you get a little clearer idea. Each of them has had multiple starts this spring that were, wow, really good in terms of efficiency, in terms of, lack of runs and hits and all that, lack of walks. So they've all had those good starts. They've all also had at least one kind of ugly start along the way. Mackenzie Gore just had one on Sunday that was one of the weirder starts you'll ever see, spring training or otherwise. First 3 innings dominant against the Mets, 7 strikeouts in the first 3 innings. He ends up with 10 strikeouts and only 4 2/3. He also ended up with 8 runs allowed, almost all of that coming in the 4th and the 5th innings. And he was kind of baffled by it. There were, a few soft hits. There was some wind that was affecting things. The defense maybe wasn't great, but he was giving up some hard hits as well through all that. So it was kind of hard to figure out like what to make of this, but I think it shows you what we've known all along with Mackenzie Gore. He can be really good, but he's got to avoid when things start to go south on him, letting it blow up. And that's what happened in that game. But bigger picture, I have liked what I've seen from him. I think he seems pretty happy with it. Josiah Gray, a couple of really good starts in there, one maybe not as much. And Jake Irvin, he had a really rough start. Met with Davey Martinez and Mike Rizzo afterwards. They said, what was going on? Said, well, I was working on this and that. And they said, no. You don't work on stuff. You're not established enough for that. Your job is to make this team. Go out there and compete. Give them the best stuff you have. Don't try to say, well, I'm trying to work on this pitch. Attack these hitters like you're really facing them in a game that matters. Well, he went out the next time and was lights out. So he got the message, and I think that was important. for him. So I think there are encouraging signs for all three of those young guys. But as we know, it's not just about how good they can be, but how consistent can they be, and can they avoid those bad starts that really plagued them all at various points last year.
Knock on wood. And, it's the kind of thing you're almost hesitant to say, but I mean, if you're going to be honest about things, Nat starters staying healthy so far this exhibition season. We have not had anything like we had last spring training season with, the Cade Cavalli news, him needing Tommy John surgery. And so it is encouraging that these guys are holding up, and, there will be at least some decisions to be made with the rotation. As we do start to think, though, about the regular season opening roster, in terms of the bullpen, is anyone tracking toward beginning the season on an injured list, or not so much right now?
Jose Ferrer just came down with what's the injury? It's a teres major strain, which is kind of the muscle in the back of your armpit that connects your arm to your upper back. He's going to be out for a little while, so he'll start the year on the IL. Whether he was really in the mix opening day or not, I'm not sure. There are some real decisions here for them to make. There are, I count, 11 healthy relievers currently and 8 spots. Now, I think we know probably 5 of them are secure. Kyle Finnegan, Hunter Harvey, Dylan Floro, who did miss some time with a shoulder soreness, but he came back and he made his debut, and he says everything is fine. Tanner Rainey, who has looked healthy, and Jordan Weems. I think those 5 are pretty much locks. Now you've got 3 more spots. Robert Garcia is the guy that Davey keeps mentioning, whether we ask about him or not, as the lefty that he seems to like the most, even though he hasn't necessarily been the best this spring of those guys. So maybe he has a slight edge. You've got other lefties in Richard Blyer, who has looked good. Joe LaSorsa, who was dropped from the 40-man roster over the winter, but he has actually pitched really well for them, has looked good. Those are the lefties. And then you've got a bunch of these right-handers who are veterans with big league experience who are here on minor league contracts, and they've all pitched well. And that's Matt Barnes, Jacob Barnes, Derek Law, and it was Robert Gesellman, and then he just got sent down the other day. I don't know how this is all going to shake out, how much you base on their performance this spring versus what you know about them from the past, but there is no way for them to keep all these guys, especially if they do have Williams as a long man in the bullpen. That's taking a spot away from someone else. They're going to have some tough decisions to make here, and there are going to be multiple guys with big league experience who have pitched well this spring who are not going to make the team. And so you just hope they pick the right ones in the end, because while some of them who don't make the team could go ahead and report to Rochester, a bunch of them have opt-outs and could decide to move on and try to get a job somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Gesellman, 1 run, 9 innings, whip a 0.67, and he gets sent down. So the Nats maybe possibly do have options, do have depth when it comes to the bullpen. Of course, we have said that before, and things end up not playing out that way exactly. So we'll see. But it does seem like the Nats do have some pieces here when it comes to the bullpen. So Joey Gallo. When the Nats announced the signing of Gallo in late January, the press release that the Nats put out labeled Gallo as an outfielder. He in his career has been an outfielder / first baseman, but him being labeled as an outfielder and the Nats foreseeing him playing left field made sense. Joey Gallo has been a very good defensive outfielder. He won Gold Glove Awards for his outfield work for the Texas Rangers for the 2020 and 2021 seasons. But a few things have happened along the way. A, he has dealt with the quadriceps ailment. B, he in spring training has been playing mostly first base. Now, maybe there's causation there of the quad ailment caused him to mostly play first base, but it was telling and interesting and at least somewhat eyebrow raising that the Nats brought in Eddie Rosario, a free agent outfielder, guy who has primarily played left field at the major league level and who also has excelled defensively in left field. Well, Davey Martinez last week comes out and says to you guys, yeah, the idea is Joey Gallo at first base, Rosario in left field. And that would mean Joey Meneses is not playing a lot of first base and is a most of the time designated hitter. So this is interesting. I mean, I guess you have to attach the caveat of over the 162 injuries will dictate whether multiple position players play multiple positions. And, over the course of the season, guys who play multiple spots will play those multiple spots. But what do you think is behind this? Is it a quad ailment for Gallo? Is it the team just preferring Rosario over Gallo defensively and left? Is it the team not liking Meneses defensively at first and so saying, let's put Gallo at first, Rosario in left? Because this was somewhat surprising. Again, that press release labeled Gallo as an outfielder. That tells you what the organization was thinking when it signed him. So What do you make of what has happened to you?
I think it's a combination of all those things. And I'm surprised by it as well and a little baffled. And I'm not sure ultimately this is the right way for them to go with this. I think, at the time they signed Joey Gallo, they gave him a guaranteed $5 million contract. I think Rosario was on their radar all winter long. They've always liked him. They just never expected him to be available for as cheap as he came. He winds up after camp has started, well after camp has started, signing with them on a minor league deal that's going to pay him like $4 million if he makes it. So I think if they had known all along they could get him for that in January, they would have made that move. And that might have impacted whether they signed Gallo in the first place, to be honest. I think there's reasons to think that in the bigger picture, Eddie Rosario has more value to you than Joey Gallo, and maybe more value as a trade chip come July also. So Rosario is an outfielder. He's not going anywhere else. He's been a good left fielder. Now, the other wrinkle in all this is that Davey said, and we've actually seen it several times now, that Rosario can play center field. And he was out there the other day. He's played a couple of games there. And the idea with that would be you keep his bat in the lineup in center. And now Jesse Winker, another veteran in camp on a minor league contract who's had a good spring, did not have a good season last year. Now he's in left field and Meneses is your DH. Now Winker's not a very good defensive outfielder from best I can tell. Rosario, he can play center field. Is he a good center fielder? I think most would say probably not. And it's interesting when you have a Victor Robles and a Jacob Young who are still here. These guys are, premier defensive center fielders, if not premier offensive players. So where does this all go? I don't know. I think Gallo's better at first base than Meneses is, but I think he's a better left fielder than a first baseman. I think they're going to be hurt by their infield defenses here. I have some concerns about some defensive regression around the board for them. I don't know what to make of all this. I'm very interested to see. This may just be one of those things that like, hey, here's how it looks when the season starts, but that's not the way it's going to continue being. This is just kind of the initial thing. Maybe there is some moving around and you have, Meneses will get some games at first. Gallo will DH. I don't sense he's going to be in the outfield very much unless there's a need there. And then, the under the radar context of all this stuff is we know there are younger, better outfielders coming at some point this year anyways, so it may not matter by the time we get to that point. But it's an interesting conundrum, and it feels like if they could have known from the outset what was going to happen, who they were going to sign for all that, they might have approached this a little differently. Now, the pieces they're adding along the way don't necessarily fit all with each other, and so it's left them with, I think, a roster construction that could be a little curious come next week.
Yeah, you certainly do hope that Dylan Cruz and James Wood render the great left field debate of Rosario versus Gallo as moot as the season goes on. But with Meneses at first, was he really struggling there? Like, how was he doing defensively at first base?
We've seen him some, but not a whole lot there. I think we've seen him a little bit over the last couple of years. He's not a Gold Glover. He's not Dom Smith over there. He's not a complete butcher. I don't think he's Adam Dunn over there either. He's probably going to be considered a below average first baseman. Gallo is maybe a little better than that. I don't think either of them is going to help you a lot in that spot. I think what's interesting is it feels like they're maybe prioritizing offense here over defense when you put all those positions together and come up with a potential lineup they could field. Now, yes, this team needs more offense, certainly, but we know how things can turn south when you have bad defense. And I do think if you end up, even if it's only certain days, with Rosario in center, Winker in left, Gallo at first, I think there's potential to be some defensive issues, and that's not the thing this team needs.
No, and defense is something that the team publicly has harped on and said we need to be better at this. And there were some coaching staff changes made that, in theory, were with the idea of improving the defense. And look, I do think, generally speaking, offense matters more than defense, but you want good defense. It certainly would help out your young starting pitchers. And if this is going to be another bad defensive season for the Nats, that's an issue. You said that you are seeing defensive regression in the infield. That was a little troubling. What exactly are you getting at there?
Well, what I mean is you look at the personnel across the board. Whoever's at first base is not going to be as good as Dom Smith was defensively. And we know that Smith helped a lot of those infielders out by saving them from errors. So it starts with that. Luis Garcia's had an erratic spring. We've talked about that. We know that. Will he be the second baseman long term? I don't know. That could change. I think C.J. Abrams is fine. Shortstop, I don't think there's a concern there. Nick Senzel, we've seen some of him. It hasn't been a whole lot. I will just say, based on what I've seen so far, he's not Jeimer Candelario, offensively or defensively, for that matter. That's one that hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but this is a guy who comes in with a reputation as having been a really high draft pick of the Reds, a guy who played all over the field, is supposed to be most comfortable at third base, and maybe over time he will be that. I would just say that based on what I've seen this spring, it's been nondescript, I would say. Not a whole lot has stood out to me about him. Doesn't mean he's been bad, but I haven't seen a whole lot either that I said, oh, wow, okay, he's really good over there at third base or at the plate. And again, give him time, we'll see. And this is not somebody who's part of the long-term plan. This is a placeholder until Brady House or Trey Lipscomb or Yo-Yo Morales maybe takes that spot. But from what we've seen this spring, I would just say I would expect regression at third base compared to what they had there last year.
Yeah, I do wonder about Nick Senzel. Nick Senzel, for those who don't know, #2 overall pick in the 2016 MLB draft out of the University of Tennessee by the Reds, who this past November non-tendered him, making him a free agent. 5 major league seasons with the Reds, an OPS of just 671, OPS plus of just 77. He has not been a good major league player. And, if he is being looked at as the everyday third baseman until Brady House is ready, I wonder if things might get really rough there. I mean, the body of work for Nick Senzel at the major league level is not overly impressive. So I hope there is a viable backup plan at that third base spot. Carter Kieboom, his name never comes up. But if Senzel faltered, would it be Kieboom or would you see somebody else getting that third base spot?
Well, Kieboom's off the 40-man roster now, remember. He was outrighted to AAA. It doesn't mean they couldn't make that move, but I don't think it would be him. I think in the short term, they would look at Ildemaro Vargas, who they know is going to play good defense, probably not hit a whole lot. And then if they felt like Trey Lipscomb was ready for the big leagues and Luis Garcia was doing well enough to stay at second base, Lipscomb can play third, and a very good third. He was a Gold Glove minor leaguer last year as a third baseman, so he'd be an option there. But again, it's kind of hard to see where exactly this is going. There's a lot of moving parts that could come into play, but Nick Senzel, as opposed to the other free agents they brought in this winter, I think are a little more secure. I feel like Nick Senzel, he's here, but he doesn't have the track record the others do, and I think there's less certainty about just how viable he's going to be there for them.
You brought up Luis Garcia. Last week ended up being a rather interesting week for Luis Garcia. Luis Garcia has maybe supplanted Victor Robles as the #1 punching bag of Davey Martinez, the player who most frustrates Davey. And there were a few miscues of Garcia that popped up in exhibition games. At one point, he got kicked off of first base after leading off an inning with a single. Davey Martinez was quoted as saying the following, quote, "That's dumb. I mean, it really is. You shouldn't get picked off there, So I'll talk to him about it tomorrow. It's no outs. We get to start our inning. He gets on base for us, and then he gets picked off. That can't happen. It can't. But like I said, we got to move on from those mistakes like that. That could take us out of potentially a big inning." End quote. What stands out there, obviously, is that Davey is Mr. Positive. He rarely publicly scolds a player. Used to do it with Robles from time to time, but he rarely does that. He did that off an exhibition game of Luis Garcia. We know the deal with Luis Garcia. He has talent, but he has been a frustrating player for the Nats. But, man, I thought that was a telling quote from Davey. And, to this idea of, is Luis Garcia a piece for the future, you wonder if this season is make or break for him.
It is, and Davey has pretty much told him it's time. You're either going to do this or you're not, and they acknowledge they have other options on the way. And essentially, yes, you're still young in terms of your age, but you've been in the big leagues for parts of the last 4 seasons. And the kind of mistakes that he's prone to making are not things they want him or expecting him to make. Everybody's going to make an error here and there. It's more the carelessness, the lack of attention at times, and that's in the field and on the bases. Now, he did have a really good base running play on Sunday, single to right field with a runner on second. The runner is held up at third, but the right fielder threw all the way to the plate. Garcia immediately read it out of the right fielder's hand and took off and got second base from that. That's what they're looking for, that kind of smart play. They know he has the ability to hit at times, but they're more concerned with, can he make all the plays in the field day in and day out, pitch to pitch, and can he be smart on the bases? And it's up to him now to prove it. I think the leash is very short there. I do think he starts the year with them. I don't think they believe that Lipscomb is ready to be the opening day second baseman, but I think the leash is very short, and I think they feel like they've sent the message to Luis Garcia, and it's up to him. And if he doesn't, they won't hesitate to make that move if they feel like they have an alternative there.
All right, the ABS challenge system, not the ABS challenge system. No, the ABS challenge system, the automated balls and strikes challenge system. The Nats got a taste of this in an exhibition game last week against the New York Mets. And look, I'm big on robo-umps and automated balls and strikes. I know not everyone is, but seeing it play out in practice, we've had it at AAA, but what do you think about seeing it up close and personal?
Yeah, the abs challenge. I know you're into that. I'm not part of the abs challenge. You beat me in that one every time. I can guarantee that. So the reason they had this was the spring breakout prospects game that they're doing across Major League Baseball, and in all of those games they had this system in place because it is something that has been used at AAA, and they wanted to get a sort of an idea of how does this work in a big league stadium. I know there's spring training, but I will tell you, I think you've heard me say before that I am not for automated balls and strikes, for robo umps. I think umpires are human and they're part of the game. And I have concerns about how accurate, and maybe not accurate is the right word, but I have concerns about what this does to disrupt the game. If you have the umpire just standing back there and reciting to everyone else through his earpiece what he hears the robot says, whether it was a ball or a strike. Now, having said that, I liked this. This is a sort of compromise in between. This is not every pitch. This is each team gets 3 challenges during the course of a game. If you get it wrong, you lose the challenge. If you get it right, you get to retain it, kind of like the coaches' challenges in the NFL. And what impressed me was how quick it was. So Drew Millis was catching for the Nats in the prospect game. He played at AAA last year. He knows how this works. He saw a pitch that was called a ball, was at the knees. He was convinced it was a strike. He just taps his helmet. The umpire behind him sees it. He gets on the microphone and announces to the crowd the strike is being challenged. And immediately, within seconds, up on the scoreboard for everyone to see, you see the little K-zone plot, shows where the ball was, calls it a strike. They reverse the call, and they get right back to it. The whole thing took 5 seconds. And the crowd kind of got into it. If that's how efficient it can be run, and if it's only a handful of times on important calls that you're challenging, I think that could be a good thing for the sport. Now, the key is there's some strategy involved. You don't want to blow these on calls that you don't get right or earlier in the game, and now you end up not having them later in the game. And Millis, in talking to him about it, he's thought this through and he's had experience with it. And the takeaways have been, don't let the pitchers challenge it. They're almost always wrong. The catchers have the best angle, the best viewpoint. Batter can do it also. If he doesn't like a call, they have some success there, but not always. Again, think about the angle that you're watching it from. So trust the catchers. And if you're the catcher, you've got to know when it's worth it and when it's not worth it to do it. But if that system were to work the way that we saw it the other day, there were 4 total challenges in the game. 2 of them overturned, both by Millis. The other 2 were upheld. If that can be done like that in a big league game, I would be for it. And I think Major League Baseball is getting closer to the point that they're comfortable instituting that.
I would like to see, in at least some of these exhibition games, them try a game with nothing but automated balls and strikes just to see what it looks like, just to see what it feels like. I mean, there are so many exhibition games, you really don't need all these games. So use them to try stuff like this out, because I think one of the arguments for automated balls and strikes is this: as pitchers continue to throw harder and harder, I think it's almost impossible for these umpires to get all of these balls and strikes calls correctly. I think it's actually impressive that umpires get as many of these calls right as the umpires do. I think umps, like, if they're off a little bit, they get just ripped apart. And it's like, man, it's not easy getting these things right when you got so many guys pumping in 95, 96, 97. Has there been any talk of trying out an entire game with nothing but automated balls and strikes for an exhibition game?
I have not heard that one. It's an interesting idea. It had not crossed my mind. I could see why you would want to give it a shot. I do know that when they used that in what the Arizona Fall League, I think it was the full-fledged every pitch, there were concerns about it, some glitches, some things about it. And, the thing, and this is what bothers me, and I think there was one call I saw in one of the other spring breakout games where when you zoom in, you can see like just a tiny fraction of a little part of the ball nicked the very corner. And it's one of those that, like, if you were watching that, you would say that's not really a strike, but it catches it and it calls it a strike. I think there are things like that a computer that's going by the true definition of the strike zone is going to call it a strike, but anybody watching it who's watched baseball is going to say, well, that's not really a strike, is it? So I think there's that element of it. I do think the umpires, from what I can gather, when it's just a few of these and it's done the way they did it the other day, they're okay with it. They would rather get it right, and it ultimately helps them. Now they see instantly, okay, that pitch that I thought was a ball was actually a strike. Maybe that helps them over the course of a game get a better sense of where the strike zone truly is, as opposed to at the end of the night, you get a report and say, well, here's how I did. Well, I can't remember every single pitch that I called and whether that one was wherever it was. So I think there is a little bit of that. But I think it's important to point out, you kind of alluded to this. Major League umpires are really, really good. Arguably better than they have been over the years in terms of balls and strikes. The difference is we now have the technology and the high definition cameras to really see just how accurate or inaccurate they are. If you went back and looked at strike zones from the 1990s, when Eric Gregg was calling balls and strikes, I think you'd see way worse than you have now. But we just didn't have the ability to really look at it and realize just how off they were. So as much heat as they take, they're right so much of the time. And I think if you can help them out a little bit, then that's worth it. I just don't want to take them out of the game completely.
It would be a tricky thing to navigate. There is an umpires union, so MLB would have to be sensitive to that. We know how the MLB Players Association is. Basically, any change the MLBPA stands against. Do you know, are players in favor of automated balls and strikes? How did they receive that ABS challenge system in that game against the Mets?
So they did like it from that game, but remember, these are minor leaguers who were in the game. So these are not established big leaguers. I think established big leaguers are more skeptical of it for obvious reasons. But what'll be interesting over the next few years, you're going to have major leaguers who will have come up through the minor leagues using it. And I think that's an important thing. Just like the pitch clock, there was hesitation from the veterans, but a lot of the younger players had already dealt with it and knew that it could work. So I don't think this is coming to MLB in the next year, maybe in 2 years beyond that. But I think eventually when it is perfected and they have it ready to go, a lot of the guys in MLB will have already dealt with it in the minors, and that makes them more agreeable to it, I think.
All right, so we are in the dying days of 2024 National Spring Training, like we said at the top of the show. Opening day for the Nats, March 28th. Now, when exactly they put out their regular season opening roster can vary. Sometimes it's on the morning of opening day, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see when those final cuts are made.
Yeah, sometimes they do it before they leave Florida. Sometimes they wait till the day of the exhibition game, which will be next Tuesday. And this year, that is an exhibition game against their own prospects. So a lot of these guys are coming to DC whether they make the team or not. Um, Chances are we may see them in that prospect side instead of on the big league side because they haven't made the team. Um, I think some of the decisions will be made before they leave town. But I would not be surprised if one or two, particularly when it comes to the bullpen, if those go right down to the wire to the last minute, because these are tough decisions. And it's not just about, who are the 8 guys you want in your bullpen to start the year. You're going to need more over the course of the season. And if there's a risk of losing somebody who opts out to go to another team, sometimes that can win out. And you keep a guy who maybe wasn't as impressive this spring in exchange for then somebody else going down who has options to the minors that you can call up whenever you need them. I think those are the kind of decisions they have to consider here. It's not just who are the 8 best guys or the 26 best guys to start the year. You've got to be thinking about 30, 35, 40 players you're going to need over the course of the year and make sure as many of them as possible are still in your organization.
James Wood making the regular season opening roster right now. Would you go over or under a 30% chance of that happening?
I'm going under. There was a point this spring I was starting to believe it was possible, but the combination of him tailing off a little bit, not that he's been bad, but certainly not as incredibly lights out as he was that first week of games, and the Eddie Rosario signing and performance with Jesse Winker. There's a crowded outfield. We didn't even mention Alex Call's hitting 407 this spring. Now, we were duped by this before. I don't think anybody suddenly thinks that he's taking off as a player, but like he's had a really good spring and he's in the mix for an outfield job. Jacob Young has done well. I just don't see where they have room right now for James Wood. The time will come. Don't worry. He will be here at some point. But for him to supplant somebody else who is established and was given a contract that suggests they're going to make the team, I think that's pretty unlikely.
You tell us what you think. Hit us up on X at Nats_chat. You can email the show, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. And as we mentioned in the opening segment, you can check us out on our website, natschatpodcast.com. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.